The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It poured down over Seoul like the city was washing something away. Maybe the summer heat, or maybe secrets that had been buried too long. Han Jun-ho stood under the wide glass awning of his grandfather's lawyer's office in Gangnam, his sharp black suit nearly soaked despite the umbrella in his hand. Inside, the room had smelled like old books and wood polish. Mr. Na, the family's lawyer for 2 generations, had spoken with a voice that carried too much weight. The reading of the will had been short and direct, until the final clause. Junho still heard it echoing in his head. The heir, Han Junho, must form a genuine romantic relationship within 30 days of this will being read. The person must fall in love with him of their own free will. Otherwise, all shares and control of Hantech Group will transfer to Han Min-kyu. He had laughed at first. He thought it was a joke, his grandfather's last attempt to mess with him. But Mr. Na had handed him an envelope with a photo and a name. Kang Ha-eun, the lawyer had said. Your grandfather met her once years ago. He believed she had the kind of heart you lack. Junho looked down at the photo again. It was slightly crumpled now. A woman with calm eyes and shoulder-length hair, wearing a modest dress, stood near a piano in what looked like a children's music center. She wasn't his type. She didn't look powerful, glamorous, or ambitious. But there was something grounded in her expression, something real. Back in his office, Junho tossed the photo onto his desk and sat down. 30 days. It sounded like a ridiculous challenge in a reality show. But this wasn't TV. It was his life, and everything he'd built, the empire he had sacrificed love, sleep, and youth for, was on the line. He tapped his fingers against the desk. He had no choice. The next day, Kang Ha-eun opened the door to her modest apartment in Mapo to find a man in a sleek gray suit holding a business card. Miss Kang, he said, my name is Han Jun-ho. I'd like to hire you. She narrowed her eyes. For what? To be my private piano tutor. I heard you're the best. She folded her arms. I teach children. I'm not some celebrity coach. I'm not asking for a performance career. I need help learning to play for personal reasons, he said, smoothly hiding the truth. Ha-eun hesitated. She didn't like the way he spoke, like everything was a transaction. But rent was late again, and her younger brother's hospital bills were mounting. She had no time for pride. I'll consider it, she said, and closed the door. 2 days later, she arrived at his penthouse in Itaewon. The place was huge, cold, and spotless, with tall windows and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. In the center of the living room stood a grand piano, black and untouched. Where's your sheet music? She asked. I was hoping you'd bring some, Junho replied. She looked at him for a long moment. You really don't know how to play at all, do you? No. I thought it was time to learn something that wasn't on a spreadsheet. The first lesson was tense. Ha-eun sat beside him, trying to teach finger placement and posture. Junho didn't like being told what to do. She didn't like people who thought money could buy anything. You're stiff, she said, tapping his wrist. Music isn't math. It's not about getting everything right. I don't have time to waste on emotion. Just show me the structure. She sighed. You'll never learn that way. But he didn't fire her, and she didn't quit. Something about their friction pulled them back for the next lesson. And the next. Ha-eun's days were long. After teaching at a local community center in the mornings and tutoring rich kids in the afternoons, she took the subway to Junho's home in the evening. Her fingers were always sore, her back always aching, but she kept showing up. At first, she told herself it was just the money, but over time she noticed things. Junho, despite his coldness, watched her carefully. He asked questions about her students, her brother, her life. He never spoke about himself unless pushed. And once, when she arrived soaked from sudden rain, he handed her a towel without a word and made her hot tea. Not coffee, not wine. Tea. No one had made her tea in years. One night, she stayed later than usual. She had been telling him about her brother's illness, and he listened silently. When she finished, she realized how quiet the room had become. Do you always pretend nothing touches you? She asked suddenly. Junho looked at her. His eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something. Maybe I just forgot how to let things in. There was a pause. Then Ha-yoon stood up, brushing it off with a half-smile. "We're done for today. You need to practice scales." As she left, he stared at the piano bench where she'd been sitting. Meanwhile, across town, Min-kyu watched the report his hired investigator had sent. Photos of Junho and a woman arriving together at the penthouse, smiling once, talking. He scowled. "If she's the key," Min-kyu said, "then she's the weak point. Time to push." 1 week passed. Then 2. Junho was still terrible at piano, but he had stopped caring about that. Every night he looked forward to her knocking at the door. Every time she smiled, he felt something loosen inside his chest. He was changing. But the deadline hadn't changed, and he hadn't told her anything about it. One evening, while tidying up, Ha-yoon found an old photo frame hidden in a drawer of the music room. Inside it was a picture of her, much younger, smiling beside an older man in a wheelchair. She froze. It was Junho's grandfather. Her hands trembled as she turned it over. There was a handwritten note on the back. "To the girl who reminded me what kindness means." She stared at it, heart pounding. The memory was hazy. She must have been 17. But why did this photo still exist in his house? Why had no one ever told her? She put it back carefully and closed the drawer. Something wasn't right, and she was going to find out what. The gray dawn of Seoul crept through the curtains of Ha-eun's small apartment as she tied her brother's shoelaces for school. His cough rattled softly, but he forced a cheerful grin. She kissed the top of his head, then pulled on her coat and hurried out, briefcase in hand. Today's schedule was long. Morning classes at the community center and tea, afternoon private lesson, and then Junho's piano tutoring across town. Some days, she wondered how she managed to keep going, but every time she thought about giving up, she saw her brother's bright eyes and remembered the promise she had made, to do whatever it took to help him. That evening, she arrived at the penthouse exactly at 7. The rain had returned, tapping against the windows like an impatient spectator. She found Junho in the living room, seated on a low stool before the grand piano. His posture was better than when they first met. He sat more naturally, fingers curved over the keys. "You're improving," she said, setting down her suitcase and opening the piano bench. He looked up, surprised. "Really?" She smiled. "I can feel you stopped treating it like a spreadsheet. Try the piece from last week." He placed his fingers on the keys and began a simple melody. Moonlight Sonata, first movement. It came out hesitant but honest. As he played, she stepped behind him and gently guided his right hand, position of a finger here, angle of a wrist there. The corners of his lips lifted when he got the notes right, as if he'd discovered a secret he never knew existed. When they finished, she closed the lid. "That was good. Better than yesterday." Junho nodded, but his gaze softened. "Thank you, Ha-yoon." He rarely used her name outside correction or instruction. Tonight, it sounded different, warm, almost personal. Over the next days, their routines settled into a quiet rhythm. On Wednesdays, they shared instant ramen and kimchi at his kitchen, Island. On Fridays, they cooked tteokbokki together. She taught him how to feel the tenderness of rice cakes under his spoon. He laughed when she accidentally dropped fish cake into the sink. They talked about the river of Han that wound through their lives. Ha-eun spoke of its banks where she and her brother once flew kites before his illness. Junho told stories of being sent to boarding school in England at age 12, how he learned to build resilience but lost the comfort of a true home. One evening, as they finished dinner, Ha-eun's phone buzzed. A message from her brother. "Mom says I did well on the test today. Thanks, Haby." She tucked her phone away, smiling until she saw Junho watching her. "She's proud of me," she said softly. "He's growing stronger." Junho reached out, hesitating, and then brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're amazing, Ha-eun. I didn't see how much you do." Her breath caught. It was the first time he had touched her without instruction. Her heart fluttered as though it recognized the gesture from some forgotten memory. She looked away and whispered, "You're welcome." Meanwhile, in an office just north of the Han River, Min-kyu peered at his laptop screen. Photos, a collection of images the private investigator had supplied, showed Junho and Ha-eun entering the penthouse, leaving for dinners, laughing at a late-night cafe. One photo was especially telling. Junho helping Ha-eun adjust her coat as she shivered in the cold. Min-kyu's lips curled in a sneer. He tapped at his keyboard, arranging a gossip blog post. CEO in Secret Romance, Company Air Staged Publicity Stunt, he titled it. The post implied that Junho's newfound softness was nothing more than a carefully timed PR scheme, orchestrated to distract from recent rumors of Hantech's declining stock and management turmoil. He scheduled the article to publish at midnight, timed to hit every morning news feed. The next day, Ha-eun awoke early to finish lesson plans. She left for the community center with her umbrella at half-mast, head full of cheerful music school scenes. When her phone buzzed with notifications, she frowned. She opened her news app and saw the headline, Han Junho's Grand Romance, Publicity or Passion. Her heart lurched as she read allegations that her own name was part of a corporate PR plan. She scrolled through comments. What a joke. She's just a hired pianist. True love or taxpayer-funded love? Her chest tightened. Memories of her brother's fragile health rushed back. The times people had pitied her, whispered that her struggles made her ripe for exploitation. Her hands shook as she typed a quick message to Junho. Are you using me? She stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Her taxi arrived at the penthouse building. She ran up the steps two at a time, rainwater splashing around her ankles, and pounded on the door. He opened it in a suit, hair damp from his own umbrella. His eyes widened at her expression. Hurt, anger, confusion. Ha-eun, he said, though his voice lacked its usual calm. You read it? She didn't answer. Instead, she held up her phone, the article glaring in the screen's glow. Is it true? His jaw tightened. He looked away, struggling for words. The silence between them cracked with tension. She turned and walked past him into the living room, his gaze following her. She folded her arms. Rain streaked the windows, behind her, as relentless as her questions. Answer me, she said, voice trembling. Junho swallowed. It's not true. But you didn't stop it. I didn't know until this morning. She shook her head slowly. That photo. She raised her phone. You posted it yourself. You wanted everyone to see it. He closed his eyes. I didn't post it, he whispered. You let me come here night after night. You let me help you build an image. His hands closed into fists at his sides. Ha-eun, She cut him off. I thought I could trust you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Her disappointment slammed into him harder than any corporate battle he had ever faced. He stepped forward. I never wanted this for my company. I never wanted to hurt you. She shook her head and turned away. Get out. Junho froze. The weight of her words hit him like a fist. She didn't wait for him to leave. She sank to the piano bench and buried her face in her hands, tears falling onto the ivory keys. He watched her for one long moment, then quietly backed out the door. Alone in the empty apartment, Ha-eun's sobs echoed. The clock on the wall ticked past noon, inching the 30-day deadline ever closer. And somewhere in the city, Min-kyu smiled, to himself, knowing he had dealt his first blow. The morning light in Seoul felt colder than usual. Ha-eun woke on the thin mattress in her tiny apartment, the space still echoing with Junho's absence. She sat up, took a shaky breath, and reached for her phone. No messages, no missed calls, just the birth announcement of a friend's nephew, and a dozen harmless group chat notifications that made her fingers ache with longing. She dressed in silence, her mind replaying every moment of the confrontation. His hesitation, the look of pain in his eyes, his inability to speak the full truth. She still held the sting of betrayal, sharper than the autumn air. Junho paced in his empty office on the 65th floor of the Hantech Tower. The walls were lined with awards and photos of grand opening ceremonies, but tonight, he saw only empty frames. With each tick of the clock on his desk, the deadline drew closer. Only 10 days remained. 10 days to prove genuine love or lose everything. The empire his grandfather built, and the woman who had become his lifeline. He stared at his own reflection in the window. The neon city lights blurred, Behind him, he had engineered deals worth millions, navigated boardroom battles, and handled scandals with the ease of a master strategist. But now, his greatest challenge eluded him: honesty. He picked up his phone and stared at Ha-eun's contact. He opened her message thread, empty. His thumb hovered over the call button, then dropped. He typed, "Please, talk to me." But he couldn't bring himself to hit send. Instead, he deleted the draft and fell into the chair, head in his hands. Meanwhile, Ha-eun taught her morning class of 5-year-olds at the community center near Hongdae. Their laughter and clumsy attempts at "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" filled the room, but she struggled to match their joy. Her mind floated back to that night. How he had looked at her when she demanded an answer. How his silence had cut deeper than any lie. She had walked away because she believed she deserved better than half-truths. Her students tugged at her skirt, pulling her back into the present. She smiled through the ache in her chest and guided them through proper finger positions on the toy keyboards. Her brother's face flickered in her mind. He had been so happy last week when she surprised him with his favorite snack. She would not allow her heartbreak to burden him. That afternoon, Ha-eun visited her brother in the hospital. The ward was quiet, with pale walls and soft murmurs. He sat in bed, propped on pillows, playing a handheld game console. His smile lit up his face the moment he saw her. "Sister," he exclaimed. "Guess what?" She perched on the edge of his bed. "What is it?" He handed her a folded sheet of paper, smudged with small fingerprints. "I asked Mom to give me Grandpa's book. Remember the one you found last year?" He looked proud. "She let me read it." Ha-eun's heart thumped. The grandfather's journal had vanished after the reading of the will. Her brother continued. "In it, Grandpa wrote about someone who saved him. Not me, someone else. He said her music made him feel alive again. And that person was you, Ha-eun." Tears blurred her vision. "Me?" He pushed the paper toward her. He wrote, "To Kang Ha-eun, whose gentle hands guided me back to hope. Thank you." She read the lines, words trembling on the page. He had remembered her kindness, even though she had forgotten the moment. That evening, Jun-ho called his oldest friend and confidant, Park Ji-sun, who headed a small but innovative tech firm. "I need to step down," he said abruptly. Ji-sun's voice cracked with surprise. "Step down? Jun-ho, you're the only one who can save Hantech. Why? Min-kyu will inherit if I fail. I'd rather the company go to someone who cares about its people, not some opportunist cousin." His voice softened. "I want someone I trust, Ji-sun." There was a pause. Then, "You're serious?" "Yes." He lifted his gaze to the darkened tower outside. "It's not worth it without her." Ji-sun sighed. "Okay, I'll talk to the board. But Jun-ho, are you sure? You'll lose more than money." He didn't answer. Across town, Ha-eun sat by the window of her apartment, the letter from her brother spread on the table. She traced the handwritten words of her grandfather, reading them over and over. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find no one, but on the floor lay a small envelope sealed with wax and a monogram she recognized, an intertwined H and J. Her hands trembled as she picked it up and broke the seal. The paper inside was yellowed with age, the ink faded but legible. "Dear Ha-eun, if you are reading this, then you have shown more kindness than most will know. You once helped an old man after his accident. Your music soothed him when he feared he would never walk again. That man was my grandfather. He believed that people like you make the world whole. I ask you now, not for his sake, but for the sake of his grandson, Han Jun-ho. He carries his burdens alone, afraid to trust his heart. You have the power to guide him to see the beauty in life again. Please, help him find his heart. With gratitude and hope, Han Sung-woo, Seoul, August 12, 2010. Her breath caught. She sank to the floor, clutching the letter to her chest. The reason she had been chosen, her kindness, her music, was written here in ink older than her memories. Her heart pounded, with both sorrow and determination. Somewhere in the high towers of Gangnam, Jun-ho stared at an empty desk, imagining what might happen if he let the company go. He thought of Ha-un, teaching children, feeding her brother, sharing laughter and tears. The wind howled outside, as the city plunged into night. Ha-un read the grandfather's final plea again, feeling a new resolve rising. She would help him find his heart, not for his wealth, not for her own hurt, but because she believed as he did that love could heal. She rose to her feet, letter in hand, and whispered to the silent room, "I'll go back." Snow began to drift over Seoul the morning Ha-un stepped off the bus near the old community center in Yeonam-dong. The flakes fell slowly, ghost-white, against the gray pavement. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and tucked the letter from Sung-woo into her pocket. Her heart pounded with hope and fear. She did not know what she would find inside. Pushing open the heavy door, she heard laughter and the soft clatter of small feet. The room smelled of wood polish and hot cocoa. Rows of colorful toy instruments lined the shelves, and at the front of the classroom, Jun-ho stood barefoot on the linoleum floor, guiding a little girl's fingers on a miniature keyboard. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, no suit, no tie, no grand piano in sight. "Practice the scale again, Mia," he said gently. The girl nodded solemnly and played. Ha-un's breath caught at the sight. The cold, distant CEO she once knew had vanished. When Mia finished, she beamed at Jun-ho. He knelt and hugged her lightly. "Very good." Then he looked up and his eyes widened with shock. For a moment, time froze. Snow fluttered against the window. He rose and crossed the room. "Ha-un," he whispered, voice thick. She crossed the floor and stood before him. In the silence, footsteps and laughter faded. His chest rose and fell with emotion she recognized, all the worry, relief, and longing he had tried to hide. He gestured toward two folding chairs at the side. "Please, sit." She obeyed. There, students, sensing something solemn, returned to their practice as if watching from a respectful distance. Jun-ho clasped his hands. "I owe you an explanation." His voice was quiet, but carried every weight he had held these past weeks. "After you left, I finally read everything. My grandfather's will, my own letters, messages from lawyers." He closed his eyes briefly. He set a test. 30 days to find real love, or the company goes to Min-kyu. I thought I could manipulate it like every deal I've ever made. But the moment I met you, the real you, I lost control. I stopped thinking of it as a test. I started thinking only of you. Ha-un's throat tightened. She remembered the nights she spent crying at the piano after he left. She remembered her brother's courage in the hospital, and the way Jun-ho had quietly supported her, even from afar. He took out the yellowed letter she had sent back. "Then I found this," he said, voice trembling. "My grandfather asked you to help me find my heart." I realized he was right, that I needed someone like you. Someone who cared more about kindness than power. Tears welled in her eyes. She chose her words with trembling care. "So you came here to teach children, to help me, because of him?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I came because of you. Because I fell in love. Before I even knew what love was, I found it in your smile, in the way you placed your fingers on the keys, in the way you never asked me for anything but honesty. I'm sorry I lied about the will. I'm sorry I hurt you." He leaned forward, searching her face. "I don't ask you to love me, only to forgive me." Silence stretched. Snow tapped the window pane like a soft applause. The children's music swelled, a playful song that drifted through the air. Ha-un looked at Jun-ho's earnest eyes and felt something shift inside her heart. "I need time," she whispered. She stood and stepped away, clutching the letter to her chest. "I need to think." He nodded, eyes bright. "Take all the time you need." Winter melted into early spring. Ha-un spent her days teaching and caring for her brother. She read and reread Sung-woo's letter, and each time she felt the truth of her grandfather's words. She thought of the nights they had shared, the music they had made, the quiet kindness he had shown her. She remembered how he stood in the subway station, holding an umbrella over her, and how he made tea instead of coffee because he paid attention. Finally, one rainy afternoon, Her brother held her hand in the hospital playroom. "Sister," he said, "Junho taught us a new song today. It's about hope." He hummed a few notes. "He says it's because Grandpa believed in music." Her chest tightened. Her brother's simple faith shattered her last doubts. That evening, Ha-Yun returned to the community center. The hall was empty except for Junho, seated at the same small piano where she had first taught him months ago. The wooden bench gleamed under the overhead light. "Come sit," he said softly, patting the seat beside him. She did. He opened the music book to the first page, the melody they had worked on together. He placed her fingers on the keys as he once did for him. The first notes rang clear and hopeful. Then it was her turn. Ha-Eun closed her eyes, felt the keys beneath her fingertips, and played. The melody wove through the room like a gentle confession. Rise, fall, pause, resolve. When she finished, she looked at Junho, and through the notes, she said yes. He reached for her hand. "When did the 30 days end?" she asked, a smile in her voice. He drew her closer and whispered, "It doesn't matter anymore. I already got everything I ever wanted." Behind them, snow began to fall outside, drifting in through a cracked window and settling on the windowsill like tiny stars. He leaned in and kissed her, soft and real, sealing a promise no claws could govern. The world outside swirled with white, but in that small room, two hearts beat as one.